Hey guys, welcome back to Just Fixing Garage. I'm Justin. If you look behind me, or I guess in front of me now, we have a 1983 Chrysler 5th Avenue. If you've been watching my videos or seen any of the other ones, you've probably seen this being parked like out here in the dirt for a very long time. It just sat there and there's a long story behind it that I'm gonna go into about it. But in short, for the beginning of this video, we put another motor in this from the factory. It's another LA318, the 5.2 or whatever, and we're getting close to being able to start it again. I'm probably going to attach some pictures when I talk about the whole backstory of why we're fixing this car and why this car. So this is Kevin's, who's in my video. So let me get into talking about this, give you the history and how long this thing's been sitting here, and then tell you like our future plans for it. And hopefully by the end of the video, talk about when we're going to have it running again so we can get out of here. It's been here for 2 years. Anyway, let's get into it. All right, guys, so like I said, it's a 1983 Chrysler 5th Avenue. They made these in Canada and I believe in the States as well. This came factory with the LA318 motor. This is not the factory block anymore. It is the factory heads that came with it. It's still a 318 block, but it came from another vehicle. Let me give you the short on this. So this is Kevin's vehicle. And right now it's 2022. In 2019 or so, he essentially had tried to do some work to this car himself. It was running and driving fine, nothing was wrong with it. But he was trying to do some preventative maintenance. So what he had done was he had bought a double sprocket timing chain kit. Okay, so factory, these have a single sprocket timing chain. And a lot of people do the upgrade to a double. It keeps it a little more secure and you end up with a, you're redoing the timing chain at the same time. It all makes sense, right? So you change the sprocket on the cam and crank and you're able to put a double timing chain on there. So he had went through and came in and pulled his timing cover off and went in here and did this all himself. And at the same time, he had been wanting to change out from what came on these cars as the lean burn system and swap over to a standard distributor with electronic pickup, all that stuff. So he had bought a kit for that as well, which included this orange box here, a new distributor and everything, and he had done that. Now, here's the fun part is he did all that and he never got it running right afterwards, all right? So it sat there for, I don't know, probably about a year. And he had been hitting me up once in a while saying, hey, do you ever want to take a look at it? And I said, at this time I was getting ready to build the pole barn. And I said, sure, once the pole barn's built, we'll come, we'll have to bring it up here and get it done. So let's fast forward to 2020. The pole barn concrete was poured and I essentially was ready to have the car brought here. So he tows it over. Again, I'll try to post pictures if I've got them. He gets the car towed over. And at this time, when he brought it to me, the timing cover was done wrong and there was a huge gap. Like they didn't put the seals in. I wonder if I can find one of the seals sitting around here, but there's essentially like a U-shaped seal that goes on the oil pan to the timing cover. That was not put on, so there was like a 1/4-inch gap just puking oil. Like you couldn't run the car. So we had done all that. We pulled the timing cover, we dropped the pan, and I put everything back together as it was. So this is, I'm gonna call this phase one. And let me reset myself and talk about phase one of rebuilding, because I feel like this car has gone through like 3 or 4 phases. Let's talk about phase one of fixing it. All right, so as I said, phase one of fixing it. The car got brought to me and the timing cover had to be pulled, as did all the accessories. We pulled that off, and essentially I got everything put in time. I made sure that was right. I redid that gasket and I put that all together. Now on top of that, he brought it with all this wiring all chewed up and messed up from when somebody else had tried to put the new ignition system in. I was able to find some articles on that, get the PDF files and wire that in properly, and we try to crank it over. We're getting spark now, but we're not getting any fuel. I found this to be a bit strange. I checked and pulled the fuel pump out. We swapped the fuel pump. It's a mechanical fuel pump just because we thought maybe that was the issue. It was not. I actually looked through the timing cover and realized that there was no there was no bolt and circular oblong piece on the cam gear. And the cam, when it spins, it's actually depressing because it's off-centered and it presses down on the fuel pump. Now, I didn't notice that when I took the timing cover off because it wasn't there when I pulled it off. So essentially I found out that, oh crap, we didn't put this piece back on and there's nothing actually, the cam gear, the gear for the cam is not actually bolted on, it's just sitting on there. And again, I didn't realize that at the time because it wasn't there before. So we had put it together, we put a bolt in, but we did not put the circular piece. So there was a bolt in it, but there was no piece that hits the fuel pump. See anything for this thing to hit? You sure there wasn't like a nub or something you were supposed to stick on the front of the sprocket?
I'm fairly certain.
So then we realized, oh man, this was messed up. So we have to pull the entire timing cover all over again, and Kevin finds the part like at his house somewhere. So it's not like it was in the car or with all the parts I had when he towed it here, it just didn't exist. So he brought it up, we put all that together, and we're getting fuel, and we're getting spark, and we adjust the timing, and we've got the car running, okay? We've got the car running, but it doesn't sound right. It feels like we're losing compression, and we almost think maybe the head gasket's gone, okay? So that was, this is still part of phase one. We did this in like a week's time. We were working out here throughout the day. It was fall time in 2020, so it was nice and cool. All right, so at this point, we've figured out the fuel issue. We're getting fuel. We've got the spark issue figured out. And now we've got our motor that is running again, all right, after it had been sitting for God knows how long. And it's in time, everything seems good, everything is great. All right, so we're gonna try to dive into what this issue is. So with it running weird and it seemed like a head gasket issue. So we had pulled the oil pan bolt, and we'd already done oil once in this, but we pulled the oil pan drain bolt and found that there was tons of water in it, water and coolant. And that's why we were thinking maybe head gasket, but the amount of water and coolant was super severe. Like it was very, very, very full, right? It wasn't like a little bit of mixture. It was gallons of coolant and water. So, and apologies, this story's long, but this car's been here for over 2 years, and there's a reason. So we're still in this part of fixing it. So I say to Kevin, we're keeping the drain plug out of the oil pan, and I'm dumping water in the radiator, and it's immediately gushing out of the oil pan. And even a head gasket, to me, I've never seen one leak that quickly. You might get some drips, especially when it's running, but in a motor that's not running, I would not expect gallon in, gallon out for coolant coming out of the oil pan. So we think something's wrong. And I tell him at this point, let's just pull the heads and take a look and see what's going on. So we pull the heads off, and lo and behold, the head gaskets look pretty good. We're not seeing any cracks in the top of the block that would have water passages going through, anything like that. Everything looks fine. So I move on to him and I say, this might be the car's already here. We might as well pull the motor out and take a look and see what's going on. I'm thinking worst case is we go and get a junkyard motor. Because it's an LA 318, they're everywhere. So we essentially go through that route and we pull the motor out, we put it on engine stand, and we find out what's wrong very, very quickly. And I hope I have a picture of this that I can show you. So essentially, prior to it ever coming here, when Kevin had, and he might be embarrassed by this, when Kevin had done the timing cover, he did not pay attention to which bolt went where. And the timing cover bolts on these have like 4 different sizes. And he drove a very long bolt into a very short hole. And what is on the other side of that bolt hole that had an end is the cylinder wall. Kevin had essentially ran a bolt into the cylinder wall and blew a chunk of the inside of the cylinder wall out. So it essentially was allowing water directly in. We're talking a hole the size of a penny that had blown out. Now at the time, again, I didn't know this, right? The car came to me with the assumption that it was just, hey, we need to do this gasket, we need to make sure the timing is good, and we need to put this electronic ignition system in. That's all I knew. That's all Kevin thought as well. But it seems like there was a lot of cooks in the kitchen and somebody had made a catastrophic mistake. All right, so phase 1 of fixing. We're gonna call that phase 1 of fix, like we were done, right? We didn't know what to do at the time, and we closed that out. So at that time we had a motor that we knew was bad and we didn't know what to do. So phase one, no good, right? First time going to fix this car, no good. So let's talk about phase two and what we decided to do from there. And obviously I think we're on it at this point, like we're on phase three at this point. We have to do everything 3 times. So phase two. Phase two was, we went to the machine shop to talk about the motor. There's a machine shop down the road. And we asked them pretty clearly, like, what do you think? Should we re-sleeve the block to fix this? And the suggestion was, you know, it's a 318 block, just get another one, right? Luckily, he did have one in stock. Like, he just had one sitting up in his loft, and it was really cheap. It's like maybe $200 or something. So we made the decision at that point, you know, if we're gonna have this motor done, let's build it up. So some of the parts that we used for the rebuild is we went and got some Keith Black pistons, because they were the ones that would give us the highest compression ratio. We're still not at a really high compression ratio, but I think it starts really low, and we got it boosted up there. We kept the factory rods. You know, obviously we're doing all new performance bearings, you know, new rings, and that was pretty much it, right? So we had taken everything to the machine shop, the new pistons, you know, we had done a new cam. I think it was a cam, I'll have to check, but we did a new cam, new springs, new locks, new retainers, all that stuff, right? The heads were, you know, getting new valves, and not new valves, sorry, they were just getting new springs and locks and such. So we had dropped off the heads, we had dropped off the block, and, you know, the pistons and everything so that they could do it. And we paid them to give us a short block back. And a short block means that the entire bottom end is assembled, the crank is in, the pistons are in, all the ring gaps are done, and then the motor's giving back to us, and we'll bolt the heads on. We had also asked them to look through the head to see if there was any issues. I don't think they ultimately did any head work at that time, but from my understanding is everything was green lit, right? Everything was fine, we were good to go. So that it was supposed to take 2 weeks from what we were originally quoted, and it ended up taking months. And that's the story for a lot of machine shops, so I don't harp on it too much with these guys. I just like honest estimations. So moving on from that, we got the motor back. This was me and Kevin's first like real rebuild of like, hey, we pulled a motor and we're putting it back in. Obviously we've done all kinds of other stuff, but this was one of our first real tests, right? So we stuck with the factory head bolts, we got the heads bolted on, did the oil pump, you know, got everything bolted on the way it's supposed to. Wind closed the door. Got everything bolted on the way it's supposed to. And dropped the motor in, we got everything bolted on. We did go with long tube headers at the time, which we still have now. We went with long tube headers that we were able to fit in there. And we were like really excited. We go to try to start this thing up and we can't get it to start. We start going over everything, and after a lot of going back and forth, making sure timing was right, we found you know, the timing was correct with the chain, but the timing was not good with the distributor. We had it like turn too much and like 180 out. We tried to dial that in. Eventually, we get it running, and we go to take it for its drive. Everything's okay. Oh, we did get new lifters as well. So it was lifters, cam. You know, we got everything mated properly. Everything was matched. We didn't like do some piecemealing. But anyway, we take it for a drive. And it seems like it's got some good pep. It's running really nice. It's got a really good idle. We're not really having any issues with it, so we take it for a test drive. And when we get back, we see oil everywhere. And at the time, we weren't sure why. We had just seen a lot of oil, and then we must have lost oil pressure as well. But we get it back here. It's still running okay, even though it must have lost like a quart and a half of oil. And we put it up on the lift, and we see that the seal on the back of the oil pan that's close to the flywheel and the torque converter completely blew out. Like, it's hanging out. You know, at the time we thought maybe we had overfilled the oil. Right, to have that much pressure blow a seal out, we're thinking we made a mistake. We must have overfilled the oil. Now we've got to drop the oil pan, which with the long tube headers and stuff is really difficult to get in there now. So that took us a day to go in and redo that. So we did this again. We had the motor rebuilt, we dropped the oil pan, we do a fresh gasket again, and we upgraded the oil pan gasket while we were in there from like a cork to like a rubber performance one just in case. Torqued it all down to spec. Like, we were really meticulous about it, which drove us crazy when things kept going wrong. We're really meticulous. And we put it all back together, and we fill it up with oil, and we go again, and it does the same thing. It blows that oil pan gasket out. So we're going crazy because we know that we didn't overfill it, right? We know that we put the right amount on there. We double checked all the pan stuff. We know. So at this point, we're wondering, well, what else can cause that, right? We're thinking, do we have are the PCV valves clogged? So we like just double checked a few things. We made sure, hey, is it venting properly? Can the pressure get out? And like everything's good. Like everything can get out. There's there's no reason that seal should have exploded out like that. So we continue to go through and do a compression test, and we're getting pretty good compression. It wasn't as high as we thought. I think when we did the compression test, we were getting like a little over 100 psi, but it wasn't like 155 or maybe 160 that we would expect on a freshly built motor. And believing that the rings are seated and everything like that. I mean, this is all like, I think it was like Molly rings or whatever. Like, we didn't go cheap. So we go from that point, and we've got the car compression test looks good. So then we're like, let's do a leak down test. We start doing a leak down test, and we're losing like 50% going into the crankcase. So we know we have a ring issue, which is crazy. To us, we're thinking, well, what could we have done wrong? Why did this happen? Are the rings not seated yet? So we go to the machine shop and talk to him and say, because remember, we bought this as a short block. They assembled all that. So we're like wondering, did they make a mistake? Did we make a mistake? What's going on? We go to the machine shop, and they tell us that if we're losing that much, if we're having that much of a leak down issue, then there's really nothing that can be done unless we pull the motor and take a look at it. So boom, we're pulling the motor for a second time. We pull the motor out, and we pull the heads and everything, and we find that there was nothing but like black gunk in the pistons. There's like chips of the piston that are like broken off. So we take it to the machine shop, and we're like, what could have happened? And the first thing he asks us is, well, what did you gap the rings at? And we respond with, we didn't. We got this as a short block. We got it back to you already gapped and good to go. So from that point, nobody's really admitting fault. We don't know what happened. Whether when we were trying to start it, we fuel washed the cylinders, and that caused all this on every single cylinder. Whether the rings weren't gapped right, and we had the end gaps hit and break, and that's really what I thought was going on. We didn't tear the whole motor apart. We dropped it off with them to look at, so we won't really ever know. They did take the motor, and unfortunately, with the damage that the rings had caused from that point, we had to board over even more. So we were originally 30 over with these pistons. We had to go 40 over, which means these pistons are trash, and this was like $600 in pistons. Plus, we have to get new bearings because the bearings got trashed from when it blew that oil out, and we weren't going to reuse the bearings anyway. And then new rings, of course, because the pistons don't come with the rings. So what the machine shop did for us at that point is they took the motor in, they reboarded it for free, they put new cam bearings in it for free, and the only thing we paid for at that point was the cost of the parts for the pistons, the new bearings that we were going to need for the main and rod bearings, and then we also had to pay for the rings. Now what they did charge us for is, after they had the heads again, they told us that maybe it was a head issue because they needed to go through and like lap the valves and do all this stuff to the head, which was never told to us before. We had dropped the heads off to be checked to make sure everything was cleared and good. And again, I don't know whose fault. I mean, I wouldn't put that fault on them. I don't want to put that fault on us, but something was clearly missed, right? Whether there was a bunch of gunk inside the heads or there was some other issue, we don't know. We could have dropped something down the intake, but we were very meticulous when we were doing this. We feel confident that we didn't do that, but again, we don't know, right? We're past that point. We're on to phase 3, but for phase 2, they charged us to do the head work because we hadn't paid for that before. So I think we paid $400 for the head work. And then we had to pay close to $700 or $800 for new parts because we had to get bigger pistons and everything. They swapped the pistons over to the new rods because these are heat up and press in, they're not floating. I guess maybe that's considered floating. Either way, it's locked in there. So we got the motor back in, I don't know, March or April of 2022. Keep in mind, we started working on this car in 2020. So phase 2 is over with. That first motor rebuild trashed. So let's talk about phase 3, which is where we're at now. So you guys, got some history, whether you fast forwarded through that or not. Sorry, just wanted you to see the carnage that we've dealt with and why that car is always in the background of my pictures, and now it's in the background behind me, finally with a motor sitting in it again. So let's talk about phase 3. So phase 3, the motor had been with the machine shop in 2021, and they were backed up, they were having COVID issues again, so things took a little longer than normal. So we got the motor back and picked it up in, I think it was March or April of 2022. Unfortunately, what kind of inclined me to pick the motor up and try to push to get it done is Kevin, his car, his house had burned down. He was very stressed, a lot of stuff going on in his life, and I thought, okay, now's definitely a good time to get his mind off of it. So we decided to go get the motor and start trying to get his mind off of things that were going on. So we picked up the motor and then we just started working on it. And again, I want to stress, when we got the motor back this time, it was not a short block. They told us that they didn't want to do that, that they didn't have the time to do it. If we wanted it back quickly, it might be 6 more months to get it back as a short block. Not exaggerating, that's what we said. So they gave it back to us. They said they did gap the rings. They had them all separated and marked and numbered. So anyway, that's how we got the motor back. So me and Kevin spent a day, when we could find time, to lay out everything, all the pistons, all the rings. We checked the gap on all of them. Some of them are a little bigger than we wanted, but none of them were too tight. Something to mention with these Keith Black pistons are, and maybe this was our problem in the first place when they had done the rings, is the clearance, the ring gap that you need for these is larger than what you would normally do. So some vehicles call for like 12 to 16 thousandths, but these are calling for like 26 thousandths. And that's because the top ring, it gets a lot hotter and expands more because the ring is further up on the piston. That's something to note. Always follow the specs of the piston and ring manufacturer. Don't just go by factory service manuals if you have aftermarket parts. But anyway, I'm talking forever, but at that point we went through, checked them all. Some of the ring gaps are a little bigger than we wanted by a couple thousandths, but at that point we weren't going to spend $100 on new rings. We felt pretty confident that we're going to get good compression and we're not going to have any ring landings smashed into each other. So from there, we got the motor back and we started assembling it. We made sure we numbered all the pistons. I didn't film any of that because honestly I was uncomfortable doing it. It was kind of my first time assembling that, besides what you've seen me do with the Neon. I actually did the Neon motor, and then after I felt confident working with Always Something in the Garage, I assembled this one. So we had all the tools, we assembled it, we made sure that because there was markings on most of the rods based on the orientation, and we made sure we followed that. I think only 2 weren't numbered, but they were on the odd cylinder sizes. Something with these 3/8 need to know is, for factory rods, there's like a dimple on one side, and it's like an opening to squirt oil on the camshaft, or so I'm told. So they always face inside. We made sure that was all good, and we assembled it. We torqued it all down to spec, and then honestly it sat for like a month or 2. We just, about a month ago, dropped the motor into the car. We first had to do oil pump, oil pan gasket. We did all the timing and dropped it in. And I'll give you the current status that we're at now. We have the engine mated to the transmission, torque converters connected. We've got to go through and tighten some bolts. We've got all of our accessories and timing covers on. The heads are bolted down and torqued to spec. We did upgrade to ARP head bolts because we were struggling to find one of the head bolts, and we just thought, we'll just upgrade. We got them for $50. So we torqued that all down to spec. Everything there looks good. And what we have left now is distributor, carburetor, get the electrical, get the starter bolted back in, get the headers bolted to the heads, put spark plugs in, spark plug wires, that kind of stuff. Really just some finishing touches, but we got hit by a heat wave these last 2 to 3 weeks, and it's been 90 degrees outside, 100 degrees in here, and we just weren't interested in finishing it. So hopefully Kevin will be up later today. He's going to try to probably get the carburetor on, the distributor, and we're going to tighten up all the engine to trans bolts and get the starter bolted on. I don't think we're gonna start it today. I think we're gonna get it ready, and we're gonna take our sweet, sweet time trying to start it the first time to make sure that we're good to go. But now that you've got a little bit of history lesson, let me talk about and show you everything on the car right now, and then what is next. And maybe at the end of this video, or maybe we'll do a separate video just talking about it. So let's see. All right, so we will maybe finish up here unless Kevin gets here soon to do some work. These last couple weekends, we just went through and started tightening everything in here. I mean, this is some of the stuff's pretty old, and we're not focusing on fixing it yet other than getting the motor running. All we did was loosely get all of our clamps in and get it ready for belts. I've got new belts ordered because the other ones were pretty dry rotted. Kevin's gone ahead and painted the block and the motor green. We've got timing cover on, water pump on. Everything here is good, all torqued to spec. We got a new oil pressure sensor back there that's electronic, that has an electronic gauge that I'll have to wire in. And we've got the cooling temperature gauge. We pretty much got everything covered now. And we've cleaned up our wiring before. It's a little messy there, but like we went through and cleaned a lot of stuff up. Again, this car came with what's called a lean burn system, which had tons of wiring, and he took that out. So I tried to clean up the wiring the best I could. You can see our headers are not bolted to the heads yet. We wanted to put the spark plugs in first because these headers are actually meant for a different Chrysler, but we have enough clearance to make them fit. I'll tell you, they do not make long tube headers specifically for the Chrysler 5th Avenue. It is not it's not a fast car, all right? This thing is a boat. But we're hoping to get this running. There's not a lot of them around here. So our goal is, again, get it running, and then there's gonna be a couple other things that we'll work on. But if Kevin gets here soon, I will keep filming him. It is a Saturday and it is a nice day out, so I'd like to go out and work on one of my neons, which I'm gonna film as well. I need to drop the transmission on that and do the rear main seal and a few other things to hopefully make that be a nice little beater. So anyway, guys, I'll follow up if we do more on this car today. Otherwise, hopefully you like the history lesson, and if you do want to see this thing get running and what else we do to it and everything, we'll keep following along. See ya.
Wake up, today's gonna be a good day. Wake up, today's gonna be a good day. Wake up.